So I know it makes sense that we should make L&D, learning and development decisions based on the numbers, but what numbers do we use? And in any case, quantifying people is hard. How do we manage all of that? Well, a discussion about this is coming up now. Hi there, I'm Andrea Adams. This is the HR Hub, and on the show we get expert insight into anything related to HR. Please subscribe to the show or to the podcast to keep learning from my wonderful guests. Today's episode is also sponsored by iSpring. They are an LMS provider and a platform for creating professional e-learning courses and training programs. I encourage you to check out the demo I did, and I'll put a link in the show notes at the end. Now to the show. Today, my guest is Lori Niles-Hofmann. I came across Lori when I was looking for a guest to talk about upskilling and reskilling, and she was doing a course on LinkedIn. She describes herself as an Edtech and AI transformation strategist. She's also an author and is releasing a book this spring called The 8 Levers of Edtech Transformation. She's been head of L&D for a number of large organizations, so I'm delighted to have her. Hello, Lori. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much, Andrea. That was just a lovely introduction, and it's wonderful to be here. I appreciate you having me.
Well, after that last conversation, I'm like totally looking forward to this. Okay, so we're going to talk about data-driven learning design or something along that line, the numbers. So when we look at data-driven learning design, what's the fundamental purpose? Basically, why are we using or why use data to develop training, especially when the data is so hard to get and so messy?
Because if we aren't using data, we're relying on intuition, and intuition never leads to good business results. So the fact is we need to find data that we can use to make more informed decisions. The idea behind data-driven learning design is not something that I thought of. This actually came from when I was working at a marketing automation company way back in the late, almost 2010. And if you know anything about marketers have tons of data points on their audiences. I mean, they know things about you, and they can design campaigns that have a really good chance of getting you to buy, just based on everything that they know about you. I mean, if you think of the algorithms that you see on Instagram, you think of the algorithms that you see on Twitter or TikTok or any of those. I mean, TikTok, even and of itself, the way it uses, algorithms is insane. But they're all trying to do something the same as what L&D is, which is to give you information to change a behavior. If you really break down what we're trying to get people to do in L&D, that's what we're trying to teach them something, give them information in order to change a behavior. That's being really reductive, but we can take a page out of how marketers do that. We won't have all of the data, of course, that L&D has, but we can take a page out of what marketers do have and even just use some of the most basic things in order to make some better decisions and rely a lot less on intuition. Yeah.
You said that we were going to try and change behavior based on data. And we have some sense of what marketing is using, but what should L&D be using?
There's a lot of what L&D could be using. Unfortunately, as we know, it's really, really hard to find. Okay. But what are some pieces of data that I like to look at? Well, suspended pieces of data are search terms. What are people going onto your intranet and searching for? And at any given time, if you have any social platforms, if you're using Slack or anything like that, what hashtags, what channels are most popular? If you're using Microsoft Teams, there's a ton of information that you can find out. You can find out what people are talking about, where people are going. You can start to really understand what we call the digital body language. That's not a term that I invented. It's a term that comes from marketing. But the digital body language of how people behave. We want to look at things like if people are viewing learning, is there stuff that they like, that they don't like? What are the drop-offs? That's like somebody walking into a classroom looking the facilitator in the eye, closing the door and walking out again. So drop-offs are really important to me. These are all pieces of data. I also want IT to tell me what are the most popular sites that people are going to. What devices are people using? Are they using mobile more than they're using their desktop? Are they using any accessibility devices? Like these are all tons and tons and tons of pieces of data that if we aren't looking at, as you can see, just hopefully some of the synapses are starting to fire. That if you aren't looking at these things, then what exactly are you designing? Where a lot of times learning just gets designed by somebody who's really, really, well-meaning and who knows a lot about learning, but maybe ignoring a whole bunch of other information that would inform the design.
Yeah, I would think that a lot of times L&D specialists are saying, okay, well, let's get together a group of people in this area and we'll have a focus group and we'll ask them what they want to know and we'll ask them how they want to learn it. And we'll, apply our adult learning principles and we'll do all that stuff and we'll come up with something. Is that not?
It's good, but it's not good enough when it comes to digital. When it comes to digital, we have a lot more information and we need to think like how marketers are going to use data. What are the demographics? What time of day of week people are most active? As I mentioned before, what devices are they using? How are they consuming learning? Are they consuming video, or are they maybe in an area where they only have a 3G network and video is not going to work, or they're using their own data plan, so video is definitely not going to work. So some things are just basics that don't even have anything to do with learning, that just have to do with accessibility. And then there are things too that people just need to know about, try and get ahead of things to understand if people are searching for certain terms, that might indicate that there's a learning need far faster than a business partner comes to L&D, which may take months.
So I think we can all appreciate that there are many barriers to data-driven learning design, and one just being the access to data. But
Yeah.
what are you thinking about when you think about barriers to doing this?
It is access to data. The problem is that the LMS doesn't always have all of the data that we want, and a lot of the things that you're going to want data on are gonna come from multiple sources. So that's really one of the biggest barriers. I think a second barrier is that a lot of people who enter into L&D as a field are not trained in data analytics. So you're either need to upskill in that, or you're going to need to get somebody who is able to do some data analytics for you. I always recommend if you can, talk to your local college or university. There's always master students who are looking for data sets to work with. That's just a little bit of a pro tip that I've done several times. Make sure you pay them because they are not working for free, but they usually have skills that can help you. The other thing that we also need to be really, really careful with data is data privacy. We need to make sure that, what data we're accessing and that it can't be attributed to an individual. So you need to cleanse that data and make sure it's anonymized because that's really critical. You also have to worry about where that data is stored, and make sure that you're adhering to the GDPR of your organization and the country that you operate in. So there can be certain rules as to, whether somebody's name, their employee number, what score they got on a test. Well, where does that data sit? And you need to make sure that you're adhering to the laws. Please don't ask me about the laws because they exist differently in every single country. But
Yeah, it's up to the individual watching this to get acquainted with their laws.
exactly, they're going to need to be acquainted with their laws and make sure you are before you start working with data.
Before we continue, a quick shout out to the sponsor of this episode, iSpring. If you're looking for an all in one e learning solution, you should check them out. They have interactive courses, analytics, and make it easier for us to do the training for our clients. So it is it's a cliche to say change is constant. And then, I mean, I've been seeing those presentations since I got out of university, maybe probably in university, about the pace of change. Initially, you talked about many, many, many different sources of data from very different places. Uh, it could be, maybe it is the LMS, but maybe it's Slack, maybe it's Teams, maybe it's how to bring all that together in a meaningful way.
Well, okay, there's a few things that you can do. Your organization may have what's known as a data lake. So you want to talk to IT and find out if there is a data lake, and that may be a place that you can mine some of that data where that data will already be somewhat available. But again, for that, you're really going to need a data analyst. For some of it, it may be just basically just getting a feed of the top 10 on any of those data sources. So the top 10 search terms, the top 10 courses that people have dropped off on, and you're just gonna end up with a bunch of Excel, which I know is ugly and is not exactly pretty, but it may be the best that you're not gonna do a lot of triangulation of data. That's when you bring data from 3 or more different places together to try and find, a consensus or a correlation. You may not be able to do that, but at least you'll have some basics. But it is gonna be gnarly, it is gonna be ugly. I wish I could say I had a pretty solution, but, I've done it with duct tape and, scissors and, Excel spreadsheets. Unfortunately, that's just the nature of what it is because the LMS just doesn't have a lot of the data that you would need in order to do data-driven learning design. It has some of it. What you can also do if you're really, savvy is you could layer upon, Google Analytics or Hotjar or something like that onto your LMS, so you start to be able to get some tracking as to where people are going and what they're clicking on, what they're not clicking on. That's another place that you can get some data from, which is a possibility, but again, that's gonna sit in its own place, so all these things are gonna sit facing very deductive. Yeah. Married it out. Exactly, exactly. I wish it were better. There's technologies that are trying to get it better, but it is ugly. It is ugly. Or you could also be using a learning record store if you're using XAPI, which is gonna give you some normalization of the data, but again, it's I guess the long and short of it is it's ugly and hard.
Yeah. I've certainly tried the duct tape approach. Absolutely. I think we all have, and I love that. I love that analogy. Uh, Now, however, when I have tried the duct tape approach, because that's all I had, I have also been in an organization of engineers that goes, but what about this? But what about that? And then they pull, and they're analytical and they know their numbers, and then they put a million holes in my duct tape.
Yes.
How have you managed that?
I said, "Well, then help me." Yeah, and just being completely honest to say, "I'm not you're right, I'm not a data engineer. I don't have a data engineer. I'm working with what I have. So help me." And be very clear on, like, what are the 4 or 5 things you want them to help you to find out. Um, I think that's the honesty factor. Yeah, ask them for help.
That's brill That is not that brilliant, but it is also that brilliant.
Help me.
Get back on them. Because I think it's something that a lot of us in HR and we get, it's kinda turns into deer in the headlights, and it doesn't need to be deer in the headlights. Just turn it back on them. Okay. Uh, how are you gonna know if your data-driven learning design isn't working and, you've come up with something and it's just you missed the mark?
Well, that's the thing is if you're really doing data-driven learning design, it's actually a cyclical process.
Okay.
So it's not just about, it's not the typical ADDIE model. And for people who've seen ADDIE, that would be analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. Now, I know there are going to be people that say, well, ADDIE can be a circle. Okay, then make sure it's a circle because it has to be a circle. So the way that data-driven learning design should be is you are going to find out that some things don't work, and that is okay. But it's about finding out the things that do work and doing more of that, and the things that don't work, you do less of. It's very, very, very basic. So if you're going to talk about, you want to set your KPIs and say, okay, I want to improve sales by X number of percent on this particular product. I'm going to push out this learning in this particular format. You may even do what's called A/B testing. A/B testing is when you have this is something for marketers. You've seen this. So two different groups get learning in two different ways, and you see which one performs better. The one that performs better, well, that's the format that you use. And then the next time you need to build something, you go, we're going to use that format because when we did A/B testing, we found out that this worked better, right? So it's constantly learning and constantly iterating.
Mhm. Okay. That was perfect. Okay. I get the feeling, that generally speaking, through this conversation and the last one, that you are at the very leading edge of L&D. So can you make some and she's gonna shake her head, but, compared to 98% of other L&D professionals out there, maybe 99, you're at the cutting edge. What predictions do you have on L&D?
The big prediction well, first of all, thank you for those very kind words. I try and stay ahead of the curve, because I like it, I'm interested in it. But if I had to make a prediction about L&D, I'm gonna go bold. The idea of the traditional L&D course as we know it, I think will be something that becomes less and less and less. Instead, what we're going to have is an AI coach that acts as a facilitator over time. So it does spaced repetition with us over time, gives us opportunity to practice, does long for learning, over weeks. But it won't be a course that's designed by one person that's sent out to the masses. That's probably my biggest prediction about L&D, and that's something that AI is already helping us with.
Uh, how does that work? I'm curious. Like, because let's
So
say, I don't know, does it identify that I need better listening skills, or do I identify that I need better listening skills, and then it looks for somehow opportunities to help me develop that?
Well, where it starts is up for debate. So you may train that coach to say, oh, you want to learn listening skills? Actually, did you know that your organization has 26 job postings open with this particular skill? Would you like to learn that skill? So we can talk about, where the debate is. Yeah, you can be quite smart. But what it would do is it would say, okay, so say we've identified the skill. Okay, let's just say for argument's sake, we've identified the skill, the person, and it's a skill that the organization needs, and it's a skill that that person has a gap in. They're gonna start feeding it information, and on a maybe a daily basis or weekly basis, it's gonna come back to that person and say, "Hey, all right, let's revisit this. Let's do maybe a video conference where you teach back something to me and I'm going to give you feedback on it. Or let's do a simulation or let's do this." And it's gonna nurture you all the way along. It's not gonna be just, "Here's some learning, here's a test, here's some learning, here's some tests." It's gonna be an ongoing coaching dialogue that you have that may be either by a text, maybe by video. Video is proving to be extremely viable as a solution for AI simulations. And it's gonna nurture you along, and then at the end of it, it's gonna say with a fairly good degree of certainty, "Yes, these are all the areas that Lori has upskilled herself in this particular skill, and now I'm going to flag it to the internal talent marketplace, and so the next time a job comes up that needs that skill, we're gonna think of Lori because Lori has done all of this training for it." And then when she gets on that job, that AI coach is gonna be an assistant to that person and is gonna help them along as they learn.
Mm.
So that one size fits all type course that you take that you have to kind of find what you're looking for and do
Yep.
I need this and click next to continue and do I need to do that drag and drop? Do I need to do that? That goes away.
Hmm. Interesting. I'm just wondering how, like, I'm really wondering about how that, like, is it, what's Microsoft's AI product? What do they call it?
Copilot
Yeah, like, is it Copilot that's doing this, or is it, or the or an equivalent? I don't know.
for an
People.
equivalent, right? Yeah, Copilot would have some of those capabilities. There are right now some B2C, so business to consumer products who would do some things similar. There's a really good product right now if you want to see it in action and I don't want to recommend products, so it's not I want to do a product pitch, but if you just want to see how it operationally is, there's a really good product called Hive Learning, HIVE.
Yeah.
So again, not an endorsement, but just if you're looking to see this type of functionality, it does have that.
Okay. I'm actually interested, so I'm gonna check that out. Okay, so if someone wanted to learn more about data-driven learning, what do you suggest?
I do have a course on LinkedIn Learning, so anybody can take it. So they can look up data-driven learning design. There's also a free ebook on my website at loriniles.com. You can enter in any email address you want, and you get a free download. And it's a little bit. I'm going to be honest. It's dated because with AI, so many different things can impact what's written in the book. But you'll get the fundamentals, and I think the fundamentals, if you're new to it, are really what you need.
Well, thanks, Lori. That was amazing. I am thinking about that duct tape analogy, which I think I'm going to use everywhere for a lot of things. But in this instance, that in many times in HR, we are duct taping our data together, and it may not be perfect, but it is going to be better than our intuition alone. And so I encourage you to think about how you're going to duct tape your data together. Thanks also to iSpring, who sponsored this episode. Sponsorships make it a little bit more likely that I will continue to produce this kind of content well into the future. And if you're ready to take your e-learning or your learning and development to the next step, I encourage you to check out iSpring or just check out the demo I did, and the link is right here. Thanks for watching out there, and see you next time.